women have won the vote. We have won the vote. The last state in Australia to grant women the right of voting. Hooray! Do you know, the Argus newspaper on the 19th of November 1908 said that Miss Vida Goldstein was in the Legislative Council and was listening intently to the bill being passed. Listening intently, I was ecstatic, absolutely ecstatic with joy. I rushed down the steps of Parliament House and I just could not contain my excitement any longer. You see, we had been petitioning for years and years to grant women in Victoria the right to vote. Oh dear, I haven't told you who I am, have I? I've just burst in while you're all enjoying your dessert. Oh, please keep going. Please keep going. Now, in 1893, the New Zealand women were voting. Years and years ahead of us. Let me tell you when the other states in Australia allowed women the right to vote. Now it's all written out here, so I don't get the states. Here we are. Right, South Australia, always a very progressive state, 1894. Western Australia, 1899. New South Wales, 1902. Tasmania, 1903. Even Queensland voted ahead of us, 1905. And we, 1908. And yet we were petitioning for women's votes long before any of the other states. But why was it that here in Victoria we couldn't vote? One man, Tommy Bett. Oh, well, excuse me, Sir Thomas Bett. He didn't want women to gain the vote, did he? No, until it was politically expedient. And you know, after we were granted the vote, a wag said to me, Vida, I think we should have a statue made of you. Now, you will be in white marble. You will have your foot on the rotund stomach of Sir Thomas Bett, and he will be in black marble. Now, I didn't agree to that, of course, did I? But you could see how people knew that Sir Thomas was against women voting. He wasn't a really nice man, you know, Sir Thomas. No, but you can't speak ill of him in Brighton. They've even got a statue to him along the Nepean Highway. Enough about Sir Thomas. I won't be referring to Sir Thomas again. Now, just let me get myself organised here. And I will tell you my interesting history. Bent by name and bent by nature. And there's a marvellous historian who's written a book, and that's the title. Now, my father was a Polish Jew, hence the name Goldstein. And he upset the civic authorities in Poland, and he had to get out of Poland, and he fled to as far as he could go, and that was Ireland. Weren't many Jewish people in Ireland at the time, I can tell you. Now, my father was born there, and at the age of 19, he migrated here to Victoria and settled in Portland. He met my mother. They married. There were 5 of us. I had one brother, and the others were sisters. And I had what you would call a very good education. Between 1884, oh, did I tell you I was born in 1869? You should know that. In 1884 to 1886, I attended the Presbyterian Ladies' College. I excelled in English, French, music, and physical education. My mother and I attended the Scots Church, and there we fell under the influence of the Reverend Charles Strong. Now, we attended the Scots every Sunday, and the Reverend Charles Strong was a little concerned that I was becoming a little bit of a, what you would call a flippity-gibbet. Well, I went to parties, to race meetings, I attended balls. I was always fashionably dressed. But he knew I had a good brain, and so he decided that I should put that brain to use. So, we, with the Reverend Strong, ventured into the slums of Melbourne. The worst slum of all, you've guessed it, Collingwood. The rats in Collingwood grew to an enormous size. And you know, the government was paying 6pence per dead rat until they discovered that some people were breeding rats to gain the 6pences. So we went into a very humble little cottage in Collins Street, and there was a woman at the kitchen table, and there were dead rabbits, and she was skinning those rabbits. Of course, the stench was not pleasant at all. And we said, "Why are you skinning the rabbits?" The rabbit skin go into the production of bell toppers for gin as well. We were appalled, of course, but it set us thinking. It set us thinking that women would always be underprivileged unless they were given the vote. Once women had the vote, they could influence government, etc., etc. And so, we were thinking along those lines. I might tell you, I gave up all the gadding about that I had been used to in my younger years. And I determined that somehow women should receive the vote so that they could exercise an influence over the government. So we worked hard for it. Now, how did we go about this? Well, I said we should attend meetings in the Parliament House and listen to the debates. We should read newspapers. We should address meetings. In other words, educate. Let the people know that voting for women was necessary for the forward-looking state. And I've already told you how long it took, because all of the other states were ahead of us. Now, what I did, I drew up methods by which we could influence people into considering women should have the vote. I've already said meetings, circulating petitions, deputations to the Premier, and I told you who he was for a long, long time, didn't I? Forming resolutions at coming meetings, distributing pamphlets, writing letters to the newspapers, going on lecture tours, organise and educate, and I insisted, non-party politics. Keep out of the wrangle of politics. Mock elections, so we would know how they were to be conducted. Appearance, very important. Very important. We didn't want to be compared unfavourably with the suffragettes in England, who often looked like the raggle-taggle gypsies, though. Do you know? I said we had to influence the laws that pertain to the home, and also the distribution of alcohol. Do you know? I travelled all over the state. And I particularly remember a meeting in the local town hall in Currumborough. We were allocated to one room, but in the main hall, the Hallelujah Chorus was performing. Well, not easy getting above the noise of Hallelujah, etc., etc. Another amusing incident I do recall, and this was in a country centre. A man called out from the audience, "Don't you wish you were a man?" I called back, "And don't you wish that you were one too?" So they were the methods that we used. I said we had to set up a symbol of equality. We should be admitted into every area in public life. We should be admitted onto municipal councils and juries. We should be able to attend universities to gain access to all the professions. The sweating in factories should cease. No more than 48 hours per week, and no employment of children under the age of 13. Also, the age of consent. Listen carefully to this, you gentlemen. The age of consent in those early days was 14. Yes, madam, you screwed up your face at that. It is horrific, isn't it? We had it raised to 18. Now I think it's about 16. Female officers in Pentridge looking after female prisoners. And equal pay for women. You still haven't talked about No. In many, many trades and professions, women still don't get their just due. So I've told you about that. Right. Now, 1914, 1918. Oh, I'm nearly forgetting. I went to the US of A. I was invited to address some women in Washington who had heard about me. Now, while I was in the US, it really was an eye-opener. Do you know, when you entered into a public space, outside the door and inside the door was a spittoon. And it was only men, of course, who made use of that facility. But to see them hawking away into the spittoons was not a pleasant sight. I took a long, long train journey in the US, 3 hours. And a young couple, newly married, sat opposite me. And there, they were doing the most peculiar thing. They were chewing gum. They had been joined in holy matrimony to spend their life in unison. But I didn't expect to sit opposite them for 3 hours with their jaws going in unison. Oh dear, what a dispiriting experience. Do you know, while I was in the US, I learnt of a woman whose name was Susan Barnfree. But she abandoned that name and called herself Sojourner Truth. She was born into slavery, one of 13 children. And she had the foresight to think that conditions would never improve as regards slavery, and also women gaining the vote. And she travelled all around. She even wrote for newspapers, etc. And there's something that I must share with you that she says. I may be but a woman, but you can liken me to a flea. I may not do you much harm, but the Lord willing, I'll keep you scratching. Isn't that wonderful? A woman being likened to a flea. So there we are. Now I've told you all about that. Now, Second World War. Oh, sorry, First World War. I was invited in 1919, at war's end, to a peace congress in Zurich in Switzerland. And women from all over the world came to partake in that congress. And I will never forget speaking with the German women. They looked so sad. The war had ended, but it was almost as if they had a foresight into the future. We feel as if we are going back into the night. What a terrible thing. And as history proved, they were right. Now, just let me see where I am up to now. Yes. Women voting. Now, the men didn't like it, did they? Did you, sir? So, they came forth with arguments, and some of them are so stupid that only men could dream them up. Well, sir, there's the door. An argument against. They couldn't fight in a war. The counter-argument was, could men survive childbirth? Women, what do you say? No. Chivalry will die. Nobody will stand up in trains and buses nor open carriage doors. They will lose their femininity. They are incapable of logical reasoning. One of the charms of a woman is her utter unreasonableness. Who would kiss a political woman? Women who want to vote are old frumps, gawks, tabby cats, trash. Women are emotional and dependent. They need a father and a husband for protection. They belong in their own private sphere, the home. Men belong in the public sphere, outside. Women's affectionate weakness is her strength. Now, if we gave them the vote, they'd have to travel to the polling booths. The pavements and roads are full of potholes. No question about getting them repaired, was there? No. Their long skirts would drag in the mud. Now also this argument, street lighting would be inadequate. don't we vote from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. and except in winter it wouldn't be dark. There are no public conveniences for women. Was there any suggestion to build some? No. I think there are more arguments here. They went on and on and on. Let's see what else we have here. Right, we've said all of that. Now, the argument for women voting. Men see women as an appendage. The tail that wags when man, the dog, is pleased. He will get a surprise in future if informed his tail would wag and want its own individuality. 4, women need to be freed from corsets that cramp the body and prejudices that cramp the mind. These arguments are absolutely wonderful. Now, how about this one from a Tasmanian doctor who should have known better? He said against. Should we subscribe to preposterous possibility of being governed by a legislative council of females, most of whom have failed in pursuit of women's great object in life, a man? Absolutely extraordinary. Every household would become an electioneering office. This is the against argument. And every fireside would become a political debating society. And lastly, there would be an end to war, cricket, hunting, and other manly sports. Can you imagine? Now, I went touring all around Victoria. I went to Portland, Dandenong, out of Victoria too, Adelaide, Albury, Hamilton, Ararat, Horsham, Avoca, Yarrawonga, Gippsland, Warragul, Currumborough, I'll never forget that with the Halloween chorus, Ballarat and Fitzroy. Now, I learnt that there was a woman, long before I came on the scene, Henrietta Dugdale. She was born in London, married at the age of 14, and then came to Victoria. She wore a divided skirt, like Amelia Bloomer in the US. Hence, Bloomers, lady. Remember Bloomers? So, she said that skirts were unhygienic, corsets caused women to faint. She grew her own vegetables. She was a very good carpenter, and she married for the 3rd time at the age of 77. What an amazing woman. She said, we must free women from the devil of male ignorance. Rapists should be locked up and undergo the surgeon's knife.
Oh, yes.
Does that make you scared, sir? Now, Louisa Lawson, she wrote a newspaper called The Dawn. She employed women only. And she stuck by that. Even though it was hard to find women to employ at various times, she would not employ a man. There we are. Now, I want to let you know that I appeared at the Bijou Theatre in Burke Street when people came in of an afternoon and we sang a song which I'm now going to recite to you. I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier. I brought him up to be my pride and joy. Who dares to place a musket against his shoulder, to shoot some other mother's darling boy. Let nations arbitrate their quarrels. It's time to put the sword and gun away. There'd be no war today if mothers all would say, I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier. Of course, the men had a counter-argument, didn't they? I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier, but as a soldier, gives me pride and joy. I'm proud he bears a gun against his shoulder like every patriot mother's darling boy. I'm glad Australia don't have mothers like Pankhurst, Goldstein, John and all their crew. Our boys must fight today, and never will I say, I didn't raise me boy to be a soldier. Hop, 2, 3, 4, hop, 2, 3. And so, on it went. War. You know, as I became better known, people composed little verses about me. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. She was pretty, she was fair, tailor-made and debonair. She was clever, she was bright, and her politics were right. She was gifted in her speech, she had mighty truths to teach. But one thing she had a-missing, which the legislator wants, and I almost blush to name it. But she really hadn't pants. No, she hadn't. Really hadn't. Poor Vida hadn't pants. For the great Australian nation, though it loves to woo and flirt, will never bend its noodle to unmitigated skirt. Well, of course, it would have been outrageous had I adopted bloomers, or what are known today as slacks. Now, just let me see where we are. Now, after the war's end and I returned home, I virtually disappeared from public life. I felt that I had done my duty. I no longer wanted to be at the centre of activities, always speaking. For example, we even spoke on the banks of the Yarra. And I'll never forget, one day the crowd was hostile. We even had a few soldiers from the war who'd been invalided listening to us on the banks of the Yarra. They were hostile to our anti-war sentiments. And so I said to the girls there with me, girls, if you have shoelaces in your shoes, untie them now, because I think we might all be pitched into the Yarra. Luckily, we weren't. In my latter years, I became a Christian Scientist. I had been raised as a Presbyterian, and I attended the Christian Science Church along the St Kilda Road in Melbourne. And I taught Sunday school there for many years. My health started to give out. I was not able to continue with that. I retired to my home in South Yarra, and at the age of 80, I closed my eyes for the very last time, saying, God, you gave me opportunities to achieve good in the world, and now I am coming to you. wonderful woman, Miss Vida Goldstein. I do Caroline Chisholm, she was another wonderful woman. And I'm doing Louise Albert Lawson too. Somebody said to me, why don't you do Germaine Greer?
Oh, help us.
I said, no, she's not dead yet. Interestingly enough, I taught her sister Jane Greer. Germaine, as most people know, went to the Star of the Sea convent, run by the Presentation nuns. They were supposed to be the best educators of girls. Jane said to the parents, I don't want to follow Germaine to Star of the Sea. Please, Mum and Dad, send me somewhere else. And they sent her to Kilbreda College, run by the Brigidine nuns, where I taught for a number of years. Jane was a highly intelligent girl, but quiet. Not like the flamboyant sister. Good. Well, I've enjoyed myself. I'm open to questions if they
That's
want
what I
to
was
ask
going to ask you.
Yes.
Before we have questions,
Yes.
I'll tell you a few secrets. Wilma was, as a teenager, Roy wanted to be on stage, and as you can see, she's very talented at that. And, she actually had a part-time job as a working in a grocery store, wasn't it?
My uncle ran a grocery store. What did I... oh, no, Coles. Coles in Sydney Road, Brunswick.
Yes, and you were 8 shillings a week.
8 shillings a Saturday morning.
That's right, just on Saturdays, yes.
Yes, only on Saturdays.
And that money was used to enable her to buy her theatre tickets.
Yes.
Because she always had this ambition as a young teenager to
I love
play
theatre.
Shakespeare and Somerset Maugham and...
Love theatre. Shakespeare.
So you can see it's been in her lifestyle, and it's quite apparent today, for many, many years.
Yes.
So
I was in an amateur production of Othello, and I played Amelia. And look, when you go home, get out your Shakespeare, go to Othello, and I think it's towards the end of the play. Amelia is married to Iago, and you know he's a nasty piece of works. Desdemona is really very, very worried. And Amelia delivers a speech telling her what men are all about. It's the most wonderful piece of writing.
That's how the secrets got out, wasn't it?
Wonderful piece of writing. Just, I think it's probably late Act 4, beginning of Act 5, whatever. It's
Good question up here. Yes.
The Louisa Lawson, when and where?
What do you mean?
When are you doing a performance of her?
I don't think, I think yours is the last performance.
When she comes back here next year.
Yes, I'll come again next year.
That would be glorious.
Yes, I don't think I have any more bookings. I think you are the last booking for the year, because, you know, people don't, clubs and organisations don't book you, what are we, mid-November now, so they don't book you. You get no bookings in December or January.
Well, it's good to finish with quality.
Yes.
Modest quality.
We look forward to the next one.
Yes, oh, Louisa was a fascinating woman. Really was fascinating. Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Gentleman over here.
Well, you have a touch of Dame Edna Everett. Can I ask you, most people would assume that Vida was Jewish,
Yes, she was.
but she didn't really...
No. Maybe I left it out at the beginning. Her grandfather was a Polish Jew. He upset the authorities and he fled to Ireland, where her father was born. He migrated to Portland in, I've forgotten the year now, but he migrated to Portland, married a woman who was of the Presbyterian faith, and so Vida was raised as a Presbyterian until later in her life she adopted Christian Science. Yes, yes. See, Goldstein, obviously a Jewish name.
I can ask very little after that. One thing I've got to mention is Macbeth. And of course, there was a bloke in charge of that, John Sumner.
Yes.
He's a great friend of yours, isn't he?
No. Look, I auditioned for Sumner. Oh, this is so funny. This is so funny. In 1952, I was in my last year at McRobertson Girls High School. And the drama teacher invited John Sumner to come to the drama club. And we all did our party pieces. And we all said we want to be actresses. And I think the response was, well, go away and grow up. Talk to me later. I'm an admirer of Sumner, what he did.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
Yes.
Sumner and I were involved in a particular case which is interesting, a university thing,
Yes.
where they employed me to be a sword fighter. Now, I wasn't the best sword fighter ever. I'm not sure the break that wasn't against me wasn't over. But fortunately, it turned out the lights. That's all I've got to say.
Yes. No, I did audition for Sumner, but didn't know him personally. He's now living in Darwin, I believe, with wife number 4.
I think he's still alive.
I worked at, when I gave up drama teaching, I worked at the Arts Centre for some time. And, oh no, I'm thinking of Barry Humphries, sorry. You mentioned Barry Humphries. No, working at the Arts Centre as a tour guide when the Arts Centre first opened and the theatre's building, you know, the public rushed in. And one of the other tour guides was Barry Humphries' first wife, Brenda.
Right.
And I was sworn, don't mention Barry's name. I think she had the worst of the alcohol years and so forth. He's a brilliant.
Do I address you as Vida? Vida, you did tell us about your university years. I was hanging on to see what it was like. It must have been awful. And the Princess Ida room up there in the
Yes.
Tell us.
My university years, Vida didn't go to university.
Oh,
I have a diploma in speech training and drama from the Conservatorium of Music, part of Melbourne University. That's me personally. When I was at the Robertson Girls High School, a voice teacher came to us, and if we had a free lesson, we could go to her. And I said, oh, I want to do what you do. And she introduced me to her teacher, the late, brilliant Eileen O'Keefe. Anybody heard that name? No, dead many years ago. She was over 70 when I went to her as a student. And I'd go to her flat of a Friday afternoon, and she'd ask me to recite something, and she'd fall asleep. Now, if you stopped, she'd wake up and criticise. But if you just went on and on and on, she'd stay asleep for some time. She was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, that woman. She also had as a student George Whaley. If you know that name, George Whaley. Now been in New South Wales for 20 or so years. He came to Melbourne a couple of years ago. He did a wonderful play, the Melbourne Theatre Company, August Osage County, I think it was called. Yes. I went to that 3 times. I think that is the most magnificent play. I know how to get cheap tickets, you see. I think that play is brilliant. And he was on stage for maybe the first 20 minutes. In like a long, long speech. He was interviewing a girl to be a servant in the home. And then after that was all over, he took his life. It's a brilliant play though, and George was magnificent.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was lovely. Can you tell us a little bit about Vida's mother, who I believe was a suffragette, and also in passing you mentioned Miss Pankhurst, and how did she contribute to the vote being granted here?
Well, I think I left out a bit today. See, I don't write a formal script. I try to work chronologically, and sometimes it doesn't. Yes. Vida met the Pankhursts when she went to England. And she learnt the story of, I think her name was Essie Davidson, something like that, who flung herself at the king's horse and was trampled to death. She didn't intend to kill herself, she just thought she'd interrupt the race meeting. But of course she got tangled up and so on. So she knew the Pankhurst. Now, what was the question again?
Vida's mother, who was a suffragette.
Yes, she was. We didn't call them suffragettes here. We reserved that. Yes. Now, I meant to read you something. Now, if we've got time, I'll just read from the suffragettes and the force feeding that they underwent. And it was absolutely gruesome. Absolutely. But I think it's worth my reading it to you. One woman related her experiences. She was held down by as many as 9 wardresses. The doctor then entered. He introduces the tube cautiously into the nose, but then thrusts it with violence through the small nasal opening into the throat. This is where the laceration occurs and swelling, and the greater the swelling, the more acute the agony. Then the tube, a yard long, is run through this nasal passage, down the throat, into the stomach. Medicine or tonic is then administered from an opaque glass so that you see nothing. Food is run through the tube, and being rich and thick, it runs slowly. Struggling at this point is impossible. Choking and coughing begin, and last spasmodically through the feeding. Tears stream from the corners of the eyes, though one is not crying voluntarily, and this pain and injury to the eyes alone is a fine torture apart from all other things. After the feeding, the doctor removes the tube by 2 vigorous jerks that seem as if they were splitting the face in half. That's force feeding. In England, we didn't have that here at all.
Gentleman here was Stephen.
Yes, a similar question to the one we just had. Can you tell us anything about her relation with her parents? Was she made strong by going to PLC, or was there parental influence? Her father, I know, was, I think, Jacob. He was colonel of the Victorian Regiment,
He was.
and he was a martinet.
Yes.
I imagine he didn't get on with his daughter. What about the mothers?
I think she had a good relationship. In this book here, we actually have a picture of Jacob in his uniform.
Yes, magnificent.
Yes. Look, I'll show it you afterwards. So, yeah, I think the relationship with her mother was good.
What was her mother's name?
Isabella. And they married in Portland. And then the family came to Melbourne in 1877 when Vida was about 8.
So Isabel is probably Irish? Portland, everybody's Irish?
Could be. I have to check that. Yes.
So she was Scottish, Isabella.
Oh, right. So
And
she was.
Presbyterian.
So she was.
Presbyterian.
Yes,
And-
of course, Presbyterian. Yes.
And Vida's father was an anti-suffragist,
He was.
and they sat side by side in the Parliament when the vote went through.
That's right. Yes, yes. She was one of 5. She had 3 sisters and 1 brother, and I think she was the oldest.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's gone past 2 o'clock, which is what we're quite aim for. I don't think I'm suppressing questions. We'll probably have lots of questions. So I'd like to thank Wilma for her presentation. No, not a presentation. It's more a theatrical.
I call it a performance.
That's what I was trying to think of. Performance, yes. That's what I'm trying to say. Performance. Whereas normally we have speakers who give presentations, but this was really a performance. And you've obviously done your homework very thoroughly, and you know.
Oh, well, I slipped up a bit, didn't I?
Well, and I can see the audience here know the subject as well. So that's been great interplay
Yes.
for you as well, I dare say. And you've really given us a treat today. We don't have this sort of treat here, so it's wonderful.
I have to warn people and say, okay, you want me as your guest speaker, but I'm really a performer. I wear a costume, and in some of my performances, I bring people out of the audience. But I don't
And
do.
you tease someone too, don't you?
Oh yes, no sense. I don't do this with Vida, we get off the beaten track if I do that.
But for those of us who don't know Vida, it's been a great education too. We've learned something
She's a
today.
wonderful woman,
Yes,
and I'm a
yes.
great fan
So
of
thank you
Vida.
very much for your
Let me tell
time.
you that I met two women who attended the Christian Science Church along St Kilda Road. I was performing, I think, somewhere a couple of years ago out in England. Two women came to me and said, we are Christian Scientists, and when we were small, we went to the kindergarten in the Christian Science Church, and Vida taught there. I said, what was she like? And they both said in unison, formidable.
That's great, you get some first-hand feeling.
I had to shake their hands. I thought,
Yes,
this is a
yes.
conduit,
Yes,
isn't
that's
it?
right. They've touched the lady.
Yes, yes, just amazing.
Yes. So we'd like to offer you these little flowers.
Oh, how lovely.
Performers normally have flowers presented to them on stage, don't they? Yes.
Oh, often.
This
Not
is
always.
nice.
Not always.
And now I'll invite the audience to throw streamers at you.